being able to now actually hold those at arm's length and not get caught up in those stories, and to know that just because my brain said it doesn't make it real or true. As you always say, like, it's not like it's gone. It's not like it never starts up and starts yelling at me. But now it's actually possible to just go, we don't need to go there today, and just hold it at arm's length and go, okay, that was a thing. And, it doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it true. And just be, a lot more kind to myself.
This is Your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 323.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen. A no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Hey there, ass kickers. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you are here. I'm especially delighted today because I have 3 clients on. These are 3 women who have been through my program, the Mentorship. And I just want to say this real quick. Even if you decide that the mentorship is not for you, for whatever reason, my hope is that you listen to these women and get motivated and inspired about the action that they took to change their lives. Maybe it's another program that you think is better for you. Maybe you're just not ready for it yet. I hope that you are, because I would love to have you. But if nothing else, I hope that you find inspiration through their stories and what they have been able to walk away with almost a year later, because I did not record these right when we were finished, right when we were fresh out of it and they were still sort of had it coming out of their pores. No, this is almost a year later, and I will just allow them to speak for themselves in this. The mentorship is currently open for applications. You can head over to yourkickasslife.com/mentorship to read a little bit more about it and fill out your application. Here's kind of a little insider information I wanted to give you about these 3 short interviews that you're about to hear. I did not coach these women in any way, shape, or form. They came on, I asked them the questions, and I didn't know what they were going to say. So some interesting patterns emerged, only one of which I'm going to point out. And it was just so exciting to me that I think it was at least 2 of them, mentioned values. Here's my hang up about teaching values. I make up a story that, oh my gosh, values is so unsexy. People aren't going to want to read about it or learn about it or hear about it. And it is like one of those things that's so foundational, that's so important. But it's just a little unsexy, I feel like. And when I wrote How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, I went back and forth with, should I put that chapter, which is chapter 15, should I put it in the beginning? Or should I put it at the end? And I went back and forth with my editor about it, and we ultimately decided that it made more sense to go at the end because I wanted to tie it up and tell you, okay, now that you have identified yourself in all of these chapters, probably, or at least some of them, in that book, the perfectionism, the people-pleasing, the isolating, the numbing out, guess what the solution is? Because if you're participating in any of those behaviors that I just mentioned, I'm pretty sure that it's not a value of yours to be a chronic people pleaser, to be someone who numbs out instead of courageously walking through hard times and your feelings. So if you're honoring your values and you know what they are, it's not that you're not going to do those behaviors anymore. It's just that you're going to recognize them faster and be able to choose something that lines up with the woman that you want to be. You guys know I mention this all the time. I talk about it ad nauseum. My fear was when I wrote the book, as someone who's raising her hand over here, who sometimes only reads half of a self-help book, I was so worried that some of you might not get to the values chapter. So, I lost sleep over this, y'all. I want you to know how much this matters to me. And I was just elated when in these interviews, a couple of them mentioned how important that values module is, which, by the way, it's module number 1 in the mentorship. It's the very first thing we jump into. It's one of those things that's not super vulnerable. That's another reason I wanted to put it at the beginning. But you will hear them talk about what that meant to them. All right, I'm going to shut up and let these women speak for themselves. So without further ado, here is Dana, Kelly, and Millie. Dana, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to talk to you again.
I know it's always a pleasure to catch up. And I selfishly love these quick little interview talks to be able to see what's going on now in your life almost a year later after the Mentorship Masterclass that you were in. So like the other women, I would love to know, how did you decide to push sign up now? Were you a podcast listener? Did you read one or both of my books? How did you come around into the community?
I was a podcast listener. I first heard you speaking on a recovery podcast, and I was like, I need to go and check out this woman's work a little bit more deeply. Mm-hmm. And so then I listened to a couple of episodes, and then I obsessively listened to all of the episodes that had come before and bought both of your books. And when I read How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, I was like, yeah, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Is she spying on me? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, seriously. It was hilarious in a not very funny, rather sad and tragic way. But I was kind of identifying with every chapter. And when you asked us at the beginning of the Mentorship Masterclass, like which one of these jumped out at you the most, I was like, I've kind of put stars next to about 9 of them, I think, the first time I went through and was like, which ones of these really stand out for me? Anyway, so...
Well, that's fairly typical. For what it's worth, that's fairly typical. Sometimes I get people who are like, oh, there was these 3 or 4, but and a lot of them overlap. So I think that's why you had 9.
Well, clearly I'm your demographic.
Yes, clearly you were. And I'm curious, because it is kind of a broad spectrum. All of the chapters of How to Stop Feeling Like Shit and the info page for the mentorship covers a lot. I'm not necessarily talking about a quote unquote straw woman, but there's a lot of different things that we cover, even in the curriculum alone. So what do you feel like were the things that you were struggling with the most, like from a practical level in your life?
Yeah. So the biggest thing was I'd been feeling really lost and without purpose and really kind of having a bit of a, I don't know, I hesitate to say identity crisis, but that was what it felt like.
Was it like a midlife crisis?
It really was. It did feel like that. And it was kind of, okay, I had very intentionally chosen to focus on roles of wife and mother. And although I'd always worked part-time, it had ended up being a job that it had been useful, but I'd been contracting and working self-employed for 12 years and doing the same thing for that whole time. So not moving forward because I was just contracting out services. And I got to the point where I just hated it. And I was like, I cannot do this anymore. But what else can I do? I don't know about anything else. I can't do anything else. And anyway, I'm stuck in this whole role of wife and mother, and it's what I need to do right now because there aren't really any other options. And I just kind of let myself talk myself into being very, very stuck and feeling at the same time really kind of conflicted about that parenting role, feeling like I wasn't doing it as well as I should be, and I wasn't patient enough and present enough and grateful enough and all of that stuff. So I just kind of got myself into this, first of all, feeling this kind of stuck, lack of purpose, lack of direction, like who am I if I don't have a job and achievements and all of that stuff, and really believing that story of having self-worth tied to achievements. And then really beating myself up for that, because at the same time, outwardly, my life was absolutely the best it had ever been. And I was like, I am so privileged and so lucky to be able to make these choices and be in this situation. How dare you be sad and resentful and lonely and not feel the value of it? Like, how very dare you?
Is it fair to say you were feeling stuck and lost? It sounds like you didn't use that word, but it sounds like that was what it was. And then you were beating yourself up for feeling that way?
Completely.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's a pickle. That is a shit pickle. It is.
It was pretty ugly. And I really got to the point where I absolutely believed all of the horrible things that my own brain was telling me. Yeah. And I couldn't get any separation from it. Like, I could not hold it at arm's length. And I believed everything that I told myself about how I'd failed and how I was failing my kids and providing them with a terrible example of how to live their lives. But I have a son and a daughter, and I was like, I'm providing them both with a terrible gender traditional role model, and this is not how I set out to live my life, and this is bullshit.
Oh, okay.
And then beating myself up about that a lot as well. So yeah, it was, I was not in a very happy place when I kind of found your work.
Well, were you, before that, have you gone to therapy? Had you taken any supplements? Like what? Because like, I think a lot of times when women come to this work in particular, because it is deeper, more transformational work, they've tried other things and had some success. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was exactly like that. I did a lot of yoga, but I did see a therapist, and I kind of worked through some of those, issues about like trying to find a purpose. And I actually did, right around the same time that I applied to the program, I also applied to go back to university and study for a brand new career, which came out of the kind of therapy process. So I was just embarking on that. And I remember one of the conversations that you and I had when we were going through that application process. And I said to you, I don't feel right now like I've got the tools to make the most of this opportunity. And I need to work through some of this other stuff and find more self-worth and confidence, and get away from some of the kind of numbing behaviors and chasing external validation and so on, so that I can just really do the best I can possibly do as I kind of start over and do a midlife career pivot. And
a little change,
yeah, absolutely. And hopefully be kinder to myself and more compassionate with, and still be a great mom as well, and still be present with them, with my family and everything else. So yeah, that was my goal.
You and I had like the former program, there was one-on-one calls included, and you and I talked, I think, for a long time. So to me, you're more of an extrovert, like very social, but when in this group of online women, and you were way on the other side of the world, did you feel nervous, or like, what was it like walking into an online group of strangers talking about like kind of your deepest, darkest secrets?
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? Actually, doing the work in a community of women was one of the things that was most attractive to me about it. Obviously, if you're in therapy, it's generally just you and the therapist in a room. And so that's great for doing some deeper work. But one of the things that I really felt like was one of the most valuable things for me was that kind of shared humanity. It was you're not alone. You're not the only person who feels this way. You're not the only person who struggles with some of this stuff. And we're all here to support each other and hold each other accountable and pick each other up and cry together and laugh together and everything else. And so actually quite the opposite. That was one of the things that I actually found really attractive about doing it, because there is that little bit of anonymity. It's not like I was sitting around with all my close friends pouring my heart and soul out to them. And that would be a kind of a different kind of vulnerability. So yeah, that was actually one of the really positive things that drew me to the program.
Okay. Because I know some people have never done anything like that before, and so they hesitate a little bit, but that's why I always like to ask. So tell us, what was one of your biggest takeaways from the mentorship?
So I loved doing the values work. And I absolutely, I loved doing that. Yeah. And it was one of the things that really did get me in touch with what I wanted my kind of career purpose to be about, and how I was going to go about pursuing that, and what that was going to look like. So really getting that, and I took a very circular route to it. And my first draft was like 87 million things down on paper, until I kind of got them organized into some themes and then priorities, and then kind of got this list of, 8 or 10, I think, down.
Well, I always get the question, like, how many values can I list that are my values or my aspired values? And I'm like, you can have as many as you want. I work with a bunch of overachievers, so I'm not going to limit you. So you took that to the extreme. I love that.
I may have. But there were a lot of things that I was like, this is really important to me. And this is this shapes my life, and it just either describes me right now, or it describes where I want to go and what I want my life to be about, or how I want to be showing up, either for people or for the world more generally. Somewhat more grandiose manner. But yeah, that was really, really helpful. And it sets the scene for so much other stuff, kind of relate things back to that values work as you went through. And then there were some really fun individual assignments as well. I loved, I hope I'm not doing a spoiler, and I loved the playlist assignment, and that was so fun to do as a community.
Do you still listen to yours?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, good. I still listen to mine too. Mine changes often and I update it.
And I stole songs from everybody else.
Of course that happens. Yes. Because you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't think of that song. Yes. Yeah. I won't tell anybody anymore. Good. But yes, that comes up, I think maybe in like the 4th module, we work on a very specific playlist. But I'm going to kind of jump in and I know, I know you do want to keep some privacy here, but you did mention one of the tools that you used recently, and please know you don't have to tell this story, but you mentioned that you had a difficult moment and you know that it was one of your unwanted identities, and that's one of the modules we cover.
Yes, and it wasn't subtle. It was it literally was spoken to me exactly the way my negative self-talk says it to me. And
in real life.
Yeah. The way that I reacted and the way I was able to kind of calm myself and
keep breathing.
And then and only explode a tiny amount. No, not even. And actually just kind of approach that. And one of the things that you say a lot, you say it in the podcast a lot, and you said it a lot to us, was get curious.
Yeah.
And ask the questions like, what if that wasn't true? Or why is that? What's underneath that? What's all of that kind of stuff? And so actually being able to sit down and kind of go, where did that come from, both for myself and for the other person, and dig underneath it and really talk about why I would be so triggered by that. And then actually show up for both myself and for the other person in a way that I was really proud of, and I think actually ended up doing good for both of us and for our relationship. And it was, I think if that had happened a year ago, it would have been a very different story.
Yeah. Not to say it didn't hurt in the moment, but it sounds to me like you were able to sort of look at it more objectively, and before you reacted poorly. and like you got, I love that you got curious about it. Oh, it's my favorite.
I left the room and went and just sat with it for a minute.
Good.
And rather than reacting in the moment, which definitely is what would have happened a year ago. And then I wanted to tell you another quick story, which was a funny thing that happened. It wasn't funny actually, but
funny at the time.
It's So I started doing my degree last year, and it had all been going really, really well. And I had a 4.0 GPA, and I was really
nice.
Yeah, so I was really happy. And then in the last module I did last year, I actually failed one assignment.
Okay.
And I haven't failed a thing for quite a long time, in quite such a objectively true way.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so I would have made that mean that I was a failure. I would have made it mean that I was on the wrong track, that this was not going to be right for me, that I was not good enough. And I would have made that a really big thing, as opposed to, wow, I just didn't really connect with the instructions for this assignment that well, and I interpreted it in a different way, and clearly that's not what they wanted. And I need to refocus and really think about things more deeply and really read the instructions very carefully and so on. And so, that was another moment that was really kind of a turning point for me. And I was actually able to sit there and go, you know what? This is okay. This is a learning experience.
Yeah.
And it does not mean that I am a failure, and it doesn't mean that I cannot pursue this career.
Oh God, that's so exciting. I mean, I'm sorry that you failed.
It's fine. It's totally fine. And because honestly, afterwards I was like, you know what? I took 0.2 off my GPA, but it's okay. I'm still in the high distinction category. Yeah. And I literally, having started back this year, I am knocking it out of the park.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God. I remember when you came and told us that you had gotten accepted to the program, and that there's actually been a handful of women in their 40s from my program that have gone back to school after, I don't know what it is, something in the water. But I love that so much. And it sounds like, and before we started recording, one of the things that you said was that your level of self-compassion has, will you explain it? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Frankly, Andrea, I had none.
Yeah.
Prior to sort of prior to doing this work. Like I literally had none. Everything was my fault, and I was quite convinced that I was ruining everything, and that it was all very dark and pointless and useless. I'm really glad to know that that's not true.
Here's what I remember is that you were sort of like you were just like fraught with anxiety. Like that's what I remember. And not anxiety from just like a generalized standpoint, but more specifically within these different relationships in your life. And I remember you talking about specific instances. I was like, well, I made this mistake, and so this whole thing is my fault. And I'm like, well, let's look at this a little bit different way. And of course it's easy for me to look at that, and other people in the group like, well, maybe it's not all your fault, and some things like that, but you were stuck in it.
I really was. I was absolutely living in that negative self-talk story, like all of them. And being able to now actually hold those at arm's length and not get caught up in those stories, and to know that just because my brain said it doesn't make it real or true.
Yeah.
Because as you always say, like, it's not like it's gone. It's not like it never starts up.
Right.
And starts yelling at me. But now it's actually possible to just go, interesting. We don't need to go there today. And just hold it at arm's length and go, okay, that was a thing. And, it doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it true. And just be, a lot more kind to myself. And it's been a real journey, that piece. And not saying that I'm perfect at it now, but that's definitely been the biggest kind of, I guess, internal gain.
Yes. Oh my God, that part is huge. And I know that a lot of people listening really, really struggle with that. And I'm glad that you also said, it's not perfect. It's still something, because it's a practice. I still have to work on it too, but I always say it's just like learning a new language. You have to continue to practice it in order to speak it fluently, and you'll get better and better at it. It's not that you're never going to make mistakes when you're speaking, and I make mistakes, and English is my native language. It's one of those things that it really is about just strengthening the muscle of self-compassion. And I think that self-compassion can get overlooked a lot by people. But if you are in that place where you are really beating yourself up a lot and finding fault in everything in your life, that will keep you spinning your wheels and staying stuck and feeling lost and not knowing what the answer is. If you get nothing but we do a lot more than self-compassion, but if you just get that has the capacity to change your life.
Completely.
It just feels better.
It does, 100%. Yeah. But just kind of working through all of those things. Like some of the other ones that were really big for me were like some of the kind of numbing out and running away, hiding out, catastrophizing, and all of those kind of behaviors that are in your book that I was able to just kind of look at in a different way and really change my relationship with food and alcohol, and some of the other things that were like my crutches and where I hid when I didn't want to feel a feeling. Yeah. That those were other things that by building that self-compassion muscle, you then have the tools to go and deal with all of that stuff and change some of those behaviors. And as you always say, the stuff that works until it doesn't. Yeah,
it works until it doesn't. And I just wanted to applaud you too for doing the hard work and showing up, even though the time zone was hard for you, and the exchange rate, because it's in US dollars. Like, I know there's all these obstacles, and you made it work. And I just appreciate you so much. And thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And is there any last words that you wanted to share? I don't want to cut you off if you had something else that you wanted to share.
No, that's fine. I actually just wanted to say as well that I really appreciate the direction that your work has gone in the last year as well. And I I loved all your older podcasts and, the interviews that you did and your kind of one woman sound offs and everything else. But I've really, really been enjoying some of the things you've done recently that have been getting a bit more political and really kind of speaking truth for women out in the world. And I love that work that you're doing. And I appreciate all of your support and your compassion and the work that you do. And I think that there are just so many of us women in our 40s who benefit from being in a supportive environment like that and really being able to kind of free themselves from some of these knots and ropes that we've tied ourselves in over the last 20 odd years or whatever. Yeah. So thank you for your work.
Well, thank you for saying all of that. And it's women in their 40s and 30s and 20s and 50s and 60s. Like they're really all over the gamut. And I just think very few women are exempt from these struggles. And again, I appreciate you coming on and talking about yours personally. I know that you probably spoke to many people who can relate to a lot of what you said. And so thank you again for being here. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And really where I like to start with this is I think it's helpful for people to know what was your journey from, being someone who was interested in personal development to joining a group like the Mentorship, because it is a bit of a big leap to go into a group and dynamic and curriculum that is sort of on the deeper end. So were you like a podcast listener, or what did that look like?
Well, about this time last year, I started listening to more and more and more podcasts. And you happened to be on somebody else's the first time I heard you. And then I started listening to your podcasts religiously. And I loved the energy and loved all of the topics that you had brought up. And I just felt like you were somebody that I could resonate with. And truthfully, somebody that sounded like a friend that I could have. But all of the podcasts I learned a ton. And I was like, this is great. So once you mentioned the mentorship program, I immediately jumped at it, and I was almost too late, but I snuck in and got in at the very last minute.
That's right. You did. You snuck in at the last minute. So what were when you, if you think back about a year ago and you think about where you were at, because I know you were not brand new to personal development. You had been on this path for a little while, but where were you struggling the most, where you felt like this particular program, I want it to help me with that?
You know what? I just felt completely stuck in life. I felt like I was getting older and I didn't know what the hell I was doing with my life. And I didn't even know where to begin or how to get going anywhere. But I knew that I wanted to do something, and I just could not seem to work myself through any of it. And I had a lot of fear and a lot of limiting beliefs about myself. And so a lot of things that I had to work through, and I had been in therapy and things like that, but there was just still something that was missing. And I really, this program ended up being perfect for that.
Well, and it's interesting because I hear that a decent amount that you're consuming personal development and things like that, but and there's so much at your fingertips, right? There's so many personal development books and podcasts and free downloads and digital programs that you can do that are self-paced. But then I hear over and over again, people say, I don't know where to start. So it's like what is it called? Like paralyzation through I can't remember what.
It's true.
Just oversaturation.
It's true. You know that you need something, but you don't know what. And it can be completely overwhelming because you could sign up for 80 million things and none of them could be right.
Right. They could be helpful, but
just not exactly what you needed to get to where you need to go.
Well, what do you think was, I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit, because of what you just said, what do you think was your biggest takeaway or biggest takeaways from the mentorship? Because it's been a full year now, almost a full year since we ended. Mm-hmm.
I learned so much from not only, first of all, I was terrified that I was going to be getting on a Zoom call in front of a bunch of women.
And I make everybody get on video, which is even more vulnerable.
Yes.
I know.
Yes. And I had kind of not had the greatest like friendships going on. And I think I was kind of in transition with all of that too. And I was just like, great, I'm going to be sitting with a bunch of women who I don't know. And, you automatically start thinking everyone's judging everyone. And that, what couldn't have been farther from the truth. I think that my biggest takeaway was not only the things that I did individually going through all of the lessons, but listening to each and every one of the women in the group when we would do our talks and our calls, and then hearing, what you would say to help them kind of work through their stuff. I mean, it was just incredible how much I actually learned, not only myself, but from listening to others. And I think that was huge. I think that I'm sure you can get so much just with the individual stuff, but I think you actually get a ton from being on with the other women.
Yeah, I think when we're talking specifically about, especially when we're talking, a large majority of the theme of the program is learning the steps of shame resilience. And, I think it's module 7 where it sort of all comes together. And that's what the curriculum is about that. So when you're talking about that, sure, it is helpful to do it individually with a therapist or a coach who's certified in this work. But when you are sharing even if it's just anecdotes about your life, or here's how I feel, it is extraordinarily powerful to be in a group like that. And I appreciate you saying that. I mean, you're not the only one who said that's one of your biggest takeaways from it. And it makes me so happy to hear that. Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, I mean, definitely. I mean, it just because sometimes something that they would say and then you would say to them would all of a sudden click for me. And it would be like, all of these like little aha moments where I'd be like, oh my gosh. And I'd be, racing to write it down. And I think that if you didn't have that group setting, you wouldn't have those other moments, it would just be kind of you isolating yourself, looking at this stuff and then talking it through, of course, but not quite the same without the other input of other people and different
seeing yourself in other people's stories and challenges.
Exactly.
Well, you touched on it a little bit, being in an online group with other women. And I know that can be a big hesitation for someone. So had you ever done anything like that before? And so if you could just say a little bit more about that experience.
No, I had not. So,
okay. So no in-person workshops or kumbayaing or anything like that?
I mean, the only thing that I could even possibly remotely is compared to is, I've been sober for a while and women's AA meetings. That would be the only thing that I could even remotely maybe compare it to. But this was totally different. And I was nervous. I was pretty nervous about it. But you know what? The minute the very first class started, I think just within minutes, to me, it just felt really comfortable. And you make it also very comfortable and easy, extremely easy for all of us to talk to. And I felt more than willing to share anything that I had written down myself doing the work that you had given us out loud to the others. And then I think, eventually we all did, and we all learned again, like I was saying, from what everybody else learned as well. So,
well, and I will say this too, I specifically created the curriculum. When I laid it all out and looked at it, I specifically created the values module first for 2 reasons. First and foremost, I think that values is a foundation. It sets the tone, it sets the map for your own personal and unique life and what you want, what do you want to get out of it, how you want to show up. And also because values is also one of those things that it's just kind of let's walk in the shallow end first before I completely throw you in the deep end. So that's on purpose.
Well, yeah, but you know what, even that, I felt like, I know what my values are. And then when you sit down to do it, it was really, I really I got a lot out of it looking back. I mean, I was looking back before I spoke to you today and I was like, my gosh, that's right. I almost kind of struggled with what I was putting as my values. Because I think that we think we know what they are, but then when we get down to it, it's like, but what are my most important ones? And what are the ones that so, I mean, that I learned a lot from each different section of it. But again, even it sounds simple as values, but it really isn't that simple.
It's not. And just to give people a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain with that particular module, it's not so much about just generally speaking overall, how do you want to live your life? But what we talk about, the nitty gritty of values, is what are the values that that you aspire to honor when shit hits the fan, like when things are hard. If you got fired, if you're going through a breakup, if a close friend of yours gets a really difficult health diagnosis and you have to take care of them, like how do you want to show up? Because it's in those moments that really test us, that really make it difficult. And not that you're going to do it perfect every time, but those are the moments that really, I think at the end of the day matter so much to us, is how we show up. And that's really what we focus on. So just telling people a little like, psst, here's what it looks like.
Snippet. Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of things that I learned that I have put into practice. And I say practice because it does take time to, program yourself to keep doing it, but they have absolutely changed the way I react to things, the way I think about things. And again, what values are important to you when the shit does hit the fan? I mean, it's all so extremely helpful just in everyday life.
I love that you said that. You learn so much about how to react to things. And that's what, I remember I was talking when I was first creating the curriculum for this and sort of first looking at the angles of how am I going to talk about this to my audience? And somebody was asking me about it, a colleague was asking me about it. And I said, well, it's what it really is at the end of the day is better coping skills. And a colleague said to me, you can't sell that. Like nobody wants to buy that. And I'm like, you want to bet? Like, like I work with people who have been coping a certain way. Like that's what How to Stop Feeling Like Shit really is. It's like we cope a certain way. And you, Kelly, are someone who's in recovery, like, like all the things that we do and, the whole, it works until it doesn't. Like we get to a point in our lives where we get sick and tired of reacting a certain way to things, whether we're reacting to ourselves, like in our own self-talk, or to other people in our relationships at work, as a parent, et cetera, that we want to change. Like we want to be proud of how we're showing up in these moments. And that really is in a nutshell what it's all about.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when I went through this work and realized truthfully the way that I was talking to myself and how that was leading to the way that I was reacting at different things. I mean, it all has made a difference. It's such a huge change, and you have to put it to work, and you have to work at it, because it does, again, it takes time to learn it and do it, but it has just I mean,
becomes a practice.
Yeah.
And that's my hope for people is like, I want people to walk away with better coping skills, better strategies, better tools so that they don't need me in their life anymore. I don't want it just to be a temporary thing that when we're together in this program for 3 months, that's when you're on fire and things are great. Like, yes, you do have me and my team at your disposal to help you, but I wanted people, that was my hope, is like, I want to give people a toolbox so they can walk away and have these things long after we're done together.
Yes. And you know what? I think that was the difference for me with your program, was that it wasn't just while I was reading your book or while I was doing this work. It is something that has stuck with me. Whereas there's so many things out there and so many books and so many programs, but again, not all of them you can just keep using. They're great. You listen to it, but it doesn't stick as something that you can use throughout life. So that's just that to me was what made such a huge difference.
I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing so candidly and for sharing your experience and your perspective. Is there any other last takeaways or anything that you learned that you wanted to share with the listeners before we say goodbye?
I don't think offhand, just that I can just say that this is something that truly, when I look back to a year ago, it has made a huge difference in the choices that I've made and the path and journey that my life has continued on. And I'm super grateful for it. And I'm super grateful for you.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate your time so much. And
thank you.
Can't wait to see what else is in store for you. Millie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
I am delighted to have the three of you on the show. Like, there's few more things that delight me more than getting to talk to people that I spent 3 months with and got to know so well. And before I get too excited and just talk about how amazing that is, which no one really gets or cares, when you came to the mentorship and took the plunge, you were a podcast listener. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I actually wasn't sure about that. I thought everyone was, but I wasn't sure.
Yes. No, I was a podcast listener first.
And did you read any of my books or just the podcast?
I read the book actually just before I took your mentorship. I
Okay.
didn't know who you were. I was listening to the recovery series that you did. And then I just became a fan and started listening to you, and then I got the book.
Interesting. Okay. And then where were you at in terms of your own personal development? Like, were you at that place where you were kind of desperate for help? Were you at a place where you were just interested in bettering yourself in therapy? Like, where were you at in terms of your own personal growth?
I mean, I had done, a little bit of everything. Some talk therapy, a lot of reading of self-development. I was a huge Hay House listener and Hay House fan. So those were kind of like my base as far as self-development. And at the time that I started listening to you, I was in early recovery. So your series was really helpful. And I just was at a point where I needed to work on certain things, but I wasn't even quite sure what that was until I heard your podcast where you interviewed people who had taken your mentorship.
Oh, that's right. So it's come full circle.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, it's come full circle.
Yeah.
And here you are. Yeah. Okay, well, what I'm interested, do you remember what
I heard?
Was it something that one of those women said? Yeah, like where you were like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with that too.
Yes. Actually, both people you had on, I connected with. One of them talked about how she had done so many different things like I did, how she had done a lot of self-development and often had started things that she didn't quite finish and had some guilt around that and feeling bad about that. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. And also, they both talked about working on shame. It was really, I mean, I had listened to Brené Brown. I don't think I had read her book yet. And so it just really piqued my interest. And I just wanted to learn more. And I really felt that everything that they talked about was something that I needed to work on at that point.
Interesting. I'll drop that link in the show notes for people who are interested in hearing. I had two women on, Carissa and Courtney. And it's interesting that you mentioned that about shame. And I think that what happens with a lot of people is that they resonate so much with the messaging that Brené talks about connection and vulnerability. And they're like nodding their heads. And yes, I struggle with this. And yes, okay, I believe you that this is the way to have more happiness and connection in my life. But then that's where it ends.
Right.
And the like quote unquote shame work feels either scary or just like this ambiguous, almost like esoteric, like weird mystery.
Right. Like,
what do we actually do?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do we actually do? Well, I know that you had mentioned that you'd done some talk therapy. Had you done anything else to try to get a resolution? I know that you had, I don't mean to be like glib about it, but like you had tried drinking. Like that was one way to try.
Well, right.
And coping mechanisms.
Right. And actually that's another thing that one of the ladies talked about, or maybe both of them did. I can't remember, but numbing and isolating. And I think those were, I know that those were the two things that I was really struggling with. I was in early sobriety, obviously in early recovery. There are other ways that eating, watching, binge watching TV. So I definitely thought that was something I needed to work on, and also isolating, not having that connection with other women, with friends. And that was definitely something that I wanted to work on. I had done other programs, but I still didn't find that type of resolution, that connection that I needed.
It's funny because now that you're saying that, I don't remember the ins and outs the details, the intricate details of every single person. But now that you say that, now it's all coming back to me about you specifically. I remember a couple of things that I made you do, but I don't want to throw you under the bus if you want to keep your privacy intact. Do you mind sharing? And do you remember anything specifically that I gave you as assignments to do?
Yes. And I think that was another thing that you really held us accountable. And even though sometimes I think I was like super busy and I was trying to not, I didn't know how to make the time. But yes, one of the things that I did was reaching out to people in my life that could possibly be marble jar friends, connecting with those people and letting them know allowing myself to be vulnerable enough to express how much I wanted to connect more with them. And one of them was someone who she had been my coach for a certain project that I was working on. And I just really adored her. And I really wanted to be more than that business connection. I wanted to be like her friend. And so she also taught an African dance class. And so I went to one of her classes, and then we ended up having a conversation about, what I was doing and how I wanted to, just kind of connect more with her and be closer to her. And what was really funny is that she really was like, what do you mean? I think we're, you're awesome. And I just think that we are great friends. And, she really, I think it was all in my head that I had that disconnect, but it definitely, and it also, exposed me to the class, which was really, really a lot of fun. It just really took our friendship to another level. And I also reached out to a friend from many, many, many years. And actually, when I was going to connect with that friend, she was a childhood friend. It was almost as if spiritually she was doing the same thing, because she ended up writing me a letter telling me how much she loved me and how much she appreciated me and how she wished that we were just closer and talking more often. And so it ended up just kind of refreshing and reviving our childhood friendship, because we literally had been friends since we were little girls.
Isn't that wasn't it like I had given you the assignment to do it and then you hadn't done it yet, but she reached out to you first?
She did.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Funny how the universe works.
It was really bizarre. And she's a doll. And
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that's the second module that we work on is trust and friendships. And that can be difficult for women really of any age. I was going to say of a certain age, but it doesn't matter. I think once we kind of get out of that high school and college time in our lives where we don't have those built-in communities, it becomes the last thing on our priority list to nurture these friendships. And part of shame resilience is having people that you can, as Brene says, share your story with someone who's earned the right to hear it. I call it a compassionate witness, but just this person or people who can meet you with empathy in times that you really need it. And that initial first step can be incredibly daunting and scary for people.
It really is. But once you break past it, once you gave me that challenge, I'm still doing it. I still will think of someone who I haven't talked to and reach out to them and invite them to do something that I think they would really enjoy, and we reconnect. And it's really, really a great exercise.
Well, and there are littler exercises too. I don't want to scare everybody and make people think that I'm going to make them reach out to,
no.
250 people first day. But speaking of reaching out to people, how did it feel being in an online group with other women? Were you nervous or hesitant, or what was your experience like?
My experience was great with those women, but I was hesitant. I mean, it's I think, especially because I suffered from isolation, I think it was a little intimidating to go into a group like that, but it really was a great experience. I think that it was so nice to be able to identify. We were all of very diverse backgrounds, but at the same time, we had such similar goals as far as what we were working on. And we could identify with each other on a lot of different levels. And it was great to have that support and that that cheerleading section too, when we did, accomplish something, or someone else holding that space for you when you're going through something challenging. I thought it was a great experience. You did a great job in gently pulling us.
I can be gentle at times. Yeah. Well, when we do this work, oh my gosh, yes, gentle is the only way to be. Like it is not about kicking ass and taking names in this particular program. Like it's definitely gentle. I want to close it out with asking you, is there any other last takeaways or anything that you learned the most that you wanted to share with the listeners?
I think I always, the thing I most remember, and I know that you had said, if nothing else, if I bump into one of you a year from now, if you remember the steps of shame resilience. And it's something that I very much aware of. Being aware of your feelings, being aware of, when you're in it, why you're in it, and speaking the shame and practicing self-compassion. And that's
you key. Did it. Oh my God, you make me cry. That's what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And
fantastic.
I think that's great.
It's funny. I just got off the phone with a client before you and I jumped on, and she also is in recovery. And we were talking about, and I told her, I said, I'm going to take my coach hat off here for a second and tell you from personal experience about learning how to walk through my own crisis and hard things and fires totally sober, and also not disconnecting, because a lot of times when we can get sober, we can still learn how to disconnect without any substances or behaviors. And what I told her, I said, it's a conscious choice. It's an intentional choice to feel my feelings. And I always rely on the steps of shame resilience. That is how I walk, because anytime we're isolating or numbing out, we're doing it in an effort to avoid shame. Like shame is always kind of like that lurking, I hate to say it, but like grim reaper. And those steps have changed my life. And I thank Brene Brown's research for it. And that's really the basis of this whole program. So I'm so glad you mentioned it. And I'm so happy that you still remember that. And it's been almost a year and you still remember
Yes,
that, so.
Yes. I had them posted on my wall for a little bit. Yeah. Until I really knew them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I don't care if you get it tattooed on your ass. Like you wouldn't be able to see it as well, but thank you so much,
You're
Millie.
welcome.
I appreciate your transparency and telling people about your experience. And thank you so much. All right, ass kickers, thank you for sticking through this. I hope you saw some of yourself in these three women who have courageously shared their story and where they were stuck and where they ended up. If you have any questions, hit us up over at support@yourkickasslife.com. We're happy to help you out. And if you fill out your application on the mentorship page and you're still not quite sure, the application does not obligate you to sign up for the program. You can still hop on a call with someone on my team who has been through the program, who can answer any questions for you. I don't want you to feel pressured. I want you to feel absolutely fantastic in your decision. So again, yourkickasslife.com/mentorship. I hope to see you in this year's round. And until next time, ass kickers, I will see you all out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.